Dr. Nick Indeglio, greetings, my friend. How are you doing?
Very good today. How are you, my friend?
Very good, thanks. Hey, Nick, it's exciting because we've transitioned out of season 1 and now we're into season 2 of Rick and Nick's excellent EdVenture. And, one of the things that we got a lot of fan feedback about that they really liked was when we reviewed, not all, but most of the EdUtopia's top research studies from 2022. We kind of walked through those bit by bit. And now EdUtopia, of course, has being a new year, they've got a different article, right, focused on the top 10 research studies in the field of education for 2023. And so what we've decided to do is take on a couple of these, tackle them, and go ahead and kind of share them with our listeners who appreciated it last time. And I think they'll appreciate it again this time.
Absolutely. And the interesting thing was that and we can talk more about this later as I think, look over more of them. There were some definite connections from 22 to 23 in terms of the themes and some of the research that was conducted that seemed to be pretty popular there. And you wanted to start with number 9 this week. So I'm going to kick it over to you to kind of introduce, but also why did you want to start with number 9?
Well, I think probably the intuitive thing to do would be to start with number 1 because it's a good one. But Nick, the problem with number 1 is we just talked about it in episode 30. For those who listen to that one, it's all about AI. And so it's valuable. It offers some new information for us to discuss, but I want us to kind of just transition, talk about something different, and then come back to talk more about artificial intelligence and its uses in education. Since we just did talk about that. So, and number 9 is near and dear to my heart, Nick, because it's about social and emotional learning. And my profession specifically is school counseling. It's counselor education. It's clinical counseling. It's all about helping people develop social and emotional capacities. And so this one, again, just near and dear to my heart. And it was fascinating as I not only read the kind of results in the research, but then kind of backed up and looked into some of the studies that led to their finding. So, Nick, I can go ahead and read that finding and give us a jumping off point. This was a meta-analysis, right? So it's the kind of the analysis of lots of different studies over the past, in fact, it was 424 studies that they looked at, and they found this is their finding and it was based upon social and emotional learning, or what we call in the field of education commonly SEL, social emotional learning. So they looked at 424 studies, and this is their finding. Students who participated in SEL programs improved academic performance, school climate, school functioning, social emotional skills, attitudes, pro-social, and civic behaviors. Boom. Drop mic. Big find. This is a very significant meta-analysis in the field of education and counseling. We lend a lot of power to kind of meta-analysis, right? They tell us not only what the results of one study, which can be affected by bias and context, but this is telling us, look, over the past few years, over 400 studies, we've looked at them all, and this is the basic finding of all of those: is basically SEL works. It works. And the first piece, in case you missed it, was it improves academic performance. That's so important for those of us kind of out in the field as school counselors or counselors working in public education in some capacity, to know that the work that we're doing in helping kids manage emotions, right, develop social skills, that is leading directly to academic performance, which shouldn't probably be a surprise for any of us, but probably is very validating and important for us to kind of remember that. But it's also a good reminder for those of us kind of as teachers or administrators that, hey, this is not a secondary kind of thing, right? This is important academic work that we're doing to set the stage for kids to develop. It's almost like learning your ABCs, right? You got to do that before you read Shakespeare. And we got to help kids manage emotions, work well in groups in order for them to succeed in math, in science, right? In English. We got to set the stage to get the basic foundational skills in order to have success. What are your thoughts, Nick?
Well, I think you nailed it. You hit the nail on the head in regards to why is this important? I think most of us of the same mindset would agree. We know this intuitively, right? But we need research to back up those points, because it's easy post-pandemic, as things, quote, get back to normal. It becomes easier to say, oh, well, we don't have to focus on the soft skills anymore. We don't have to worry about everyone's emotional well-being. We can go back to drilling and killing and the whole bit there. This is a critical reminder of the importance that it plays in the academic acquisition as well. And I think that last sentence in the description of the meta-analysis, where it references one specific piece, which is, I guess you would say it was a little more qualitative, this comment, but let me just read it for you real quick. The 2021 Thomas B. Fordham survey revealed that parents reacted negatively to classroom instruction that was labeled social and emotional learning.
Yeah.
But were favorably disposed when a single clause was added, calling it social, emotional, and academic learning.
Mm-hmm.
So the political divides that exist, the left versus the right, you're trying to indoctrinate our kids, you're trying to throw DEI in there, you're trying to, all of the things. Once you kind of say, nope, this has academic reasons as well, and as you just illustrated, Rick, meaningful academic gains. You know what I mean? Like it's looking at mathematics, it's looking at reading, it's looking at all of it.
Yeah.
And we know that carries over specifically to teacher relationships with students, overall school culture, the way kids feel when they're in school. All of those things matter. When we were when I was prepping, like, to kind of talk about some of this, I was thinking a lot about different ways that we could provide examples. And actually, the best example came last night when I wasn't even expecting it to, which was we had a rescheduled school dance. We were going to do a fall harvest dance. And it turned out that the high school playoff football game was that night, and we lost a lot of our volunteers and the whole bit. So we rescheduled it for Friday, last night, which is leading into Martin Luther King Day weekend. A lot of people on 3-day weekends go away and things like that. So we only had about 110 kids attend the dance. A lot of kids coming in the door that I didn't, and I hate to say what I don't mean it like this, but I didn't recognize, meaning they're not kids who are on my radar or the kids who necessarily stop to always say hello when they're coming in the morning or in between classes. But every one of those kids with a few songs here or there were on the dance floor the entire time. When the dance was over, they were saying thank you. And I thought to myself, as the last kid was getting picked up, I said, man, I would have in previous years, I might have looked at 110 kids out of 1,200, you know what I mean? Or whatever, as it wasn't a success. But we actually provided an activity that 100 kids enjoyed, which means it was well worth it and accomplished everything these studies are talking about, because that type of environment is targeting that exact thing. Mm-hmm. So post-pandemic and really looking at the value of SEL, I am starting to see things differently as time's going on in terms of, value and where you get the most bang for your buck. I don't know if that makes sense exactly, but
Yeah, it does for sure, Nick. Yeah, as I look kind of closer at that, there was an article kind of connected to this. It was entitled "How to Sell SEL," because what you already mentioned is that term, social emotional learning, and it was it was pretty straightforward. It said, look, Republicans don't like that term. They think it's liberal indoctrination. That's what they hear when they read or hear social emotional learning, which. Mm-hmm. To me is tough, because that's core to the work that I do and I teach in school counseling. And I consider myself very conservative. So, socially and politically, very conservative. And so when I read that, hey, Republicans hate this term, it makes me think, okay, what do we do? Do we change the term? Because what the research is also saying is they don't necessarily hate the work, that they just don't like the term, right? So, but the work, when you change it to the actual things that school counselors or teachers or administrators are doing, when you call it life skills, anger management, teamwork initiatives, they like that, right? Responsibility, creating good citizens. They like all that. Do that, right? Republicans and Democrats alike would say, do that, right? But when you use that specific term, social and emotional learning, you get half the population in general balks. They say, nope, don't do that, right? They think, look, and I think, oh gosh, what do I do now? Does our profession have to change the term? Do we have to just get rid of the term and delete it from all the textbooks and new revisions, getting rid of the term to make it more inclusive for everybody, or it's just, or do we go on an educational campaign and teach people what social emotional learning is? I don't know. I don't know the answer to this, but I've been wrestling with it since reading the article, thinking, I don't know what to do. I think it's not the problem. So should we change the term just because of a misinterpretation? That seems silly to me. And maybe evidence of a greater cultural problem of political division and culture wars. And I think, well, yeah, but we can't fix political division and culture wars. I don't want to take on that beast of a problem. I don't think anybody
Right.
does. So is it just easier just to let's not use that term because you're going to have too many parents balking? It's like, well, honestly, in my field, we don't. I recommend to my counselors, if you're going to do yoga with students, don't call it yoga.
Mm-hmm.
Don't call it
I
yoga.
love it.
Yeah, you're going to have people kind of balk at that, right? If you want to do relaxation training, most people will be okay with that, right?
Yep.
Emotional regulation training, yeah, most people will be on board with that, but you can't call it yoga, right? Even the word mindfulness, which for years has been kind of, benign term, now kind of gets lumped in there with social emotional learning, as some kind of liberal indoctrination. So I don't know. I'm just wrestling with it, Nick, and wrestling even how to manage it moving forward with my students.
Yeah, I think, and you make a great point, and I'll attribute this to the Grandpa Simpson waving his fist on the lawn, "Get off of my lawn." As I get older, there are things I just don't want to have to argue and prove to people anymore. It's like, look, I've been doing this long enough to know certain things are just true. So just shut up and listen. This is what I do. I don't go to my doctor, and after the third time the doctor says, you need penicillin. You know what I mean? It's like, yeah, you know what, doc? I don't like the term penicillin. How about a bacterial resistant medication? Can we? However, we do realize the political nature of things. And if we're going to be able to do something good for kids by calling it a more benign term, then fine. You know what I mean? Like, I'll say social, emotional, and academic learning. Instead of mindfulness or yoga, emotional regulation or relaxation exercises, whatever it takes. Because once the kid tells the parent or whomever, oh, hey, that was really helpful, that changes it instantly. You know what I mean? Like, and you can only take that so far. Like, there are going to be certain people who are on a platform and really feel like, you're trying to indoctrinate, and you really can't argue that. You know what I mean? Like, that's one of those, you go back to, some arguments just aren't worth having. It's not a hill worth dying on. Is the juice worth the squeeze? But okay, if we have to work a little bit harder to couch things a certain way, or I guess the other side to that, because you always try to find the positive side in anything, is maybe by us having to think a little bit harder, we'll even work harder and pick better methods to use. Mm-hmm. And if that's the case and it causes more positive reflection, maybe in a certain instance, yoga isn't the best technique. Maybe something else would work better in a given situation. So, if it forces more reflection, then it's not always necessarily a bad thing, I don't think.
Yeah, great points, Nick. There was another piece in one of these articles connected to this that caught my attention. Where was it? It's in that How to Sell SEL article, and they came up with 5 key points or findings from this. And one of them says, and we've kind of touched on this, but let me kind of repeat it. Across the political spectrum, parents regard families as the most important entities for cultivating social and emotional learning. And I think, sometimes counselors, school counselors, teachers, administrators, they can play a role in not only providing the services, but reminding parents of that, right? That, hey, here are some good resources. Here are some recommendations for what you can do at home. And hopefully that doesn't feel kind of imposed upon the family, but just kind of as a reminder that these things are important, and you're the primary you have not only the responsibility but the opportunity to lead your kids in regards to social, emotional, and character development. I know that's a tricky thing to do, and to do it in a way that's received well, but I think that is important, to be able to provide good information and resources for parents who can again be reminded that, hey, this is my primary job. This is where kids are going to learn how to be good citizens. Is from the home. Is from my family. And I think. Go ahead, Nick. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead. Finish the thought.
I was just going to say, I think one of the most important things I did as an elementary school counselor for years, we would teach relationships and some sexual education in sixth grade. And
Mm-hmm.
there was a lot of pushback on when to start that sexual education and relationship education. And to be honest, kids needed it in fourth. I mean, and not getting it was problematic because of where they were at physically. So they were needing some of that information. But we couldn't politically do that in a very conservative environment that I was working in. But I think one of the best things I did is send letters home to parents, hopefully that actually got to the parents, the crazy backpacks. But got home to parents, reminding them that, hey, your kiddo is in fourth grade, and kind of, we're not going to be providing that yet, to wait till sixth grade, but it would be helpful to kind of talk with your kids. And here are some good resources. Here are some books. Here are some online materials that I would encourage you to take a look at, maybe talk about with your kiddos. And I thought that was a good role for me. I've always felt good about that as a school counselor, that I didn't impart the information myself, but it reminded parents and equipped them and empowered them and reminded them that, hey, this is not only your job, but it's your opportunity to make a difference with your kiddos. So how many parents followed through, I don't know. And I never got a lot of feedback, but I always thought that's a good role for me in that position.
Well, and it's a necessary one, because whether it's the left or the right, there are more expectations being placed on schools and what they expect us to do, and more blame being put on us for things that we allegedly aren't doing. Yeah. So that's part of it. Like, you can't, I guess you could argue that it shouldn't be part of it, but it is. And we deal with it every day. 90% of the discipline that we deal with, or behaviors that we deal with, are outside of school behaviors. You know what I mean? So, and people expect us to deal with it. So the whole, not my kid, or it doesn't work. And I think you gave a great example, because parents very frequently will be like, why are we talking about those things in seventh grade? And we'll be like, well, because it's happening in fourth grade.
Yeah.
Not my kid. They're not being exposed to those things. And it's like, well, do they ride the bus to school? Yeah, they are. Do they have any access to anything online that you aren't supervising 24/7? Then yeah, they are.
Yeah.
It's real. Sure. It's all real.
Yeah.
One of the things we also have talked about in previous episodes in regards to social, emotional, and academic learning are different programs and resources out there that are good. And I think as part of this segment, it would be helpful to kind of review some of them that we've talked about in the past just a little bit, for any educators, counselors, even parents who might want to look into some of those resources. Now, your list is far more comprehensive than mine, Rick, but just a couple that I would mention that I have found useful. Our district uses Second Step. Second Step is one that definitely gets controversy, even though there's pretty much absolutely nothing controversial in the middle level curriculum, and certainly not in the elementary curriculum. So that is a program where, and you can actually see, pretty much all the content that's in there. I have found it to be well organized, well structured. They do put a lot of focus on building a student's self-worth and self-value, while at the same time learning how to empathize with the greater community. You know what I mean? Like kindness, learning what is harassment, what is bullying, and things like that. What does it really mean? We recently had one of the lessons, which is a harassment lesson, and it mentions sexual harassment. A couple parents contacted me directly, very upset when they heard that the topic was sexual harassment. So I just sent them the content so they could see it. And then they immediately replied back and were like, our bad. No, you're all good. It's not, not what I thought, not what I thought it was. And that ended, that piece of the controversy there. So Second Step's a big one that I'm a fan of. At the elementary level, and I know that this is used a lot of times for neurodivergent populations sometimes. However, it's called Coping Cat. Where they talk about different ways to regulate, and there's characters based on emotions, and oftentimes different ways of getting stuck. One of my favorite characters along those, the Coping Cat type programs is in a program called Superflex, and one of the characters is Rock Brain. He just can't get out of his own way. Like, he can't think flexibly. So that's like one of my favorite, because there's some humor there, I think. The Coping Cat program actually has a teenager-based program as well. It's a little bit older. I think it was established around 2002, but it's called the CAT Project. And that also has some good activities, and I think, pretty comprehensive in ways. And another one that I'm a big fan of, and I'm using to supplement some of the lessons we're offering through Second Step now, and you'll know this one, almost instantly, the zones of regulation.
Yeah.
Which again goes elementary through secondary. And that's one of the big reasons I like zones of regulation, because you can start teaching those zones and the different strategies in the elementary level, and it can follow up all the way through high school. And for just, if anyone is listening who, buys into some of there's conspiracy with these types of things, we say zones. The blue zone, is when you're sad, you're bored, you're tired, you're sick. The yellow zone, you're worried, you're frustrated, you feel silly, excited. The green zone, happy, focused, calm, proud. And then there's the red zone, when you could be overjoyed and elated, or you could be angry or terrified or panicked. So, when you really start thinking about it from that context, it's that kind of encompasses most of the emotions that we have to deal with. And all of those feelings, at some level, you do have to learn how to regulate. Particularly, I guess you would say, in the blue and the red zone, but even in the green zone, you have to kind of learn how to manage flow states and momentum too. So I think that's important. So those are just some of the programs. You've talked about a lot more of them. If there's any you want to kind of kick on as it being important.
Well, one that has been around for a long time. It's actually based out of Penn State University. We're both grads of theirs. PATHS. It's promoting alternative thinking strategies. That's a great one. Research-based and supported. Do So is one that's been used in the elementary school for a number of years. Life Skills Plus is another great SEL curriculum. And if you look at CASEL, CASEL, capital CASEL, you'll find lots of kind of materials and resources in that website. It's CASEL, I think, .org. It's just full of great resources and materials. And one of my favorites, I know I've mentioned on the show before, because it's Nick Vujicic's his curriculum, which is based on CASEL, is altitude, or attitude is altitude. That's it. Attitude is altitude. And Nick's, I know I've mentioned him before. Look him up on YouTube. He's just a great guy. And he's got an amazing story, amazing kind of inspiring story. And he's put together a curriculum for social emotional learning with lots of videos. And I think the kids really respond to him quite well. So lots of good ones out there.
For new listeners to the show, do you think he has recovered from the crazy fan who once accosted him in the ocean on the beach on his vacation?
I don't know if he's socially, emotionally recovered from that. He may have had to use a few of his own resources, but no.
Potentially, he was in the red zone for some of that. Potentially,
he might have been. But he was very kind and So, like I said, I probably should reach out to Sam and see if he'd be willing to kind of be on the show sometime.
That would be great.
He's just an inspiring individual, and kind of has already made such a difference in his life, in lots of people's lives. I mean, so
absolutely, for sure. Yeah. So Rick, that's number 9 of the 10 biggest research studies of the year, and I'm sure a lot of the people who listen frequently to the podcast are happy to hear that there's even more research backing up the importance of social emotional and academic learning, and those types of important things that we've always integrated and known were important, but now even more so, knowing that there is an impact from the academic standpoint, that really a focus has to be kept on them. I think it's important.
Absolutely. It's a good reminder to us all that words and terms matter, how people's interpretations matter. And so we want to build bridges whenever we can. And
all right. Well, as we wrap up this episode, Rick, we'll give a quick shout out to our friends from Riverside who provide the platform that we use to record the podcast. And we're going to try again because in the last episode it didn't work. So we'll see. We'll see what a little bit of Riverside help sounds like to us. Here we go.
Right. Sounds good.
Powered by Riverside FM.
There you go. Pretty easy, right?
That's a deep voice. Was that Darth Vader doing that? That was great.
He had a very deep voice.
Yeah.
Well, there's also a Riverside tune that could take us out of the episode. So why don't we hear what that sounds like, and we'll see all of our fans next time. Enough of that.